A small desert town says goodbye tonight. 20-year-old Jose Mackintosh was stabbed to death on his Mormon mission to Russia. Today, he was buried in the Nevada town where he grew up. Fox 13's Courtney Zavala is there in Alamo. She joins us now with more. Courtney?
Hope, you know, it's been a very long, very emotional day here in this small town of 900 people. Now, there is a feeling of emptiness here tonight, but earlier today, when Jose Manuel Mackintosh Jr. was being remembered, there was also a feeling of joy. Family and friends have traveled near and far for Jose's funeral, and the tiny town of Alamo, Nevada was basically closed for much of the day. Jose's former high school let out early. The town grocery store closed its doors, and so did the town's credit union. Jose touched many lives, including some he never met. Mr. and Mrs. Borden, parents of Elder Borden, Jose's missionary companion in Russia, made the trip from Arizona to be at the funeral.
I think we've thought from the very beginning that this was something that we needed to do, that we needed to show our support for the Mackintosh family, and that if our son could have been here, this is where he would have been, and he would want us to be here. So there wasn't really any question.
Oh, Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the sun.
We thank thee for the opportunity that we have together here today in memory of my brother, Jose Manuel Mackintosh Jr.
He read the scriptures every day. By the time he went on his mission, I believe he had read the Book of Mormon at least 4 or 5 times. Jose was on a mission to work. In the last letter he sent, he said, and I quote, "I've been working really extra hard lately to get good studying in and not to waste time, because I noticed that after I hit my year mark, I started to want to be a little lazier. But now I'm going full throttle again. I get the feeling that soon I'll be transferred."
Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee.
A lot of people think that we lost our son, but no, we still have it. Still our son. In this earth, yes, and it's with our Father, and we will see him again someday. There is no doubt in our minds whatsoever. We will miss him while he's gone.
Jose Manuel Mackintosh Jr. has paid the highest price a human being can pay for his love and devotion to the gospel of Jesus Christ. Missionaries love their missions. Nobody loved his mission more than Jose Mackintosh. No one.
We send him off now to his next mission with much love. We thank the Lord for the privilege of having him in our family. And now in closing, I want to tell Jose one last time, buenas noches, Jose, y yo te quiero.
As you can tell, the family is handling this situation remarkably well, and there's really no anger at all either. In fact, during services today, Mr. Mackintosh asked for prayers for the Borden family, that their son recover soon and very well, and that's amazing. So many people commented on that today, that a man who just lost his son is asking for prayers for another family. This family truly is seeing the good in all of this bad that has happened to their family. Incidentally, Hope, I do want to tell you, we do have word tonight. Elder Borden, that is Jose's companion in Russia, is recovering very well. He is in a hospital in Germany and said to be walking around and doing very well. So that's good news on such a sad day. Hope?
What special people. Courtney, thank you.
Kids bringing guns to school. Classmates killing one another. It's an alarming trend on school campuses, and it's one that Utah school leaders don't want to see happen here. Today, the Utah Council for Crime Prevention sponsored a special conference aimed at
window peeping on his guests.
And the biggest hurricane of the season is headed for land. I'll show you where it may hit. Eyewitness News is next.
All of us, as is common, have come to try to give them strength and give them encouragement. They're in there giving people strength and encouragement. It's a remarkable family.
Friends and family of a murdered LDS missionary mourn his loss, but find strength through their faith in the young man's cause. Good evening, I'm Dick North.
And I'm Ruth Todd. Straight ahead on Eyewitness News, a live report from Nevada on the funeral of Elder Jose Mackintosh. But we begin tonight in a small Utah tourist community where the owner of a well-known motel is charged with window peeping on his guests. The innkeeper of the Wonderland Motel in the Wayne County town of Torrey faces 32 counts of gross lewdness. Central Utah correspondent Robert Walls reports some women in town say they're not surprised.
Investigators staked out the Wonderland Inn in Torrey for 2 weeks.
Family, friends, and LDS church leaders gathered today in Alamo, Nevada to eulogize Elder Jose Mackintosh, the young missionary killed 10 days ago in Russia. Our religion specialist Carol Makita joined us now from our affiliate in Las Vegas with more on today's funeral. Carol.
Richard, it was a solemn occasion for the small town of Alamo, Nevada. The residents, who all know each other so well, were united in their desire. They all came to honor Elder Mackintosh and his family.
The service began with a familiar hymn. Some of it these young men sang in Russian. More than 1,000 people crowded into the chapel in Alamo, Nevada to express their love for Elder Jose Mackintosh. His parents bid their son farewell.
We send him off now to his next mission with much love. We thank the Lord for the privilege of having him in our family.
His father wished to send a message to the people of the country where his son died.
No animosity and no ill feelings whatsoever towards the people of the city of Ufa.
Elder Jeffrey R. Holland thanked those parents for giving the sermon of their lives and spoke of the Russian people's love for their son.
The little Russian lady who was interviewed and said she's weeping for her boys. She's not a member of the church. I will consider it one of the greatest blessings of my life that I have met your family and this boy in this experience. I will treasure it forever.
His brother's last words in the service were also for the saints in Ufa.
We pray for the people that Jose was visiting when he was killed, that they will feel thy peace and thy spirit.
Elder Holland also said that the effect of this young man's mission is unprecedented. The world now knows who he is, all about his work and his love for the Russian people. And the world also knows about the faith, the great faith of his parents. Richard?
Nice job, Carol. Thank you.
Prison when he was sentenced in December. Here's a bit of a positive spin on the NBA lockout.
Jazz like food and heat. Just 5 years ago, underpaid and frustrated army troops took to the streets of Moscow in an attempted military coup. Experts say the current crisis is even more volatile. But in the middle of all this instability, the LDS Church is gaining a solid foothold in Russia.
The church was officially re-registered and recognized by the Russian government this past May, and there are now more than 500 Mormon missionaries in the country.
Fox 13 News sent Scott McCain to Moscow for a week to take a look at what's happening with the church in Russia.
And he joins us now to show us what he found. How is the church doing there, Scott?
Well, Bob and Hope, a lot better now than when 1998 started. It's been a monumental year for the LDS Church in Russia, even as things have gotten worse for the average Russian. The number of LDS missionaries and baptisms are on the rise, as well as church welfare efforts. All of this after a pair of missionaries were kidnapped, then safely returned back in March. And of course, after the events of 2 weeks ago, when 2 missionaries were brutally attacked, one being stabbed to death. But the church is moving full speed ahead, as we discovered in our mission to Moscow. simple breakfast of ham and eggs, followed by a prayer to keep them safe.
Найти тех людей, которые ищут тебя. И, пожалуйста, благослови это наше.
Half a world away from home.
Why don't you go ahead and start us off?
All right.
For elders Lawrence Callahan and Bradley Reeves, it's the beginning of a daily ritual as they prepare to spread the Mormon gospel in Moscow.
The number of baptisms alone is not the important thing. What is important is for you to see conversion from an eternal perspective.
The biggest challenge is trying to make yourself understood. Like, you want people to see the things that you see, and trying to communicate that is the hardest thing. And after you know the language, it's still hard.
So after studying scripture, the elders' second priority is practicing Russian every day.
Два главных препятствия стоят на нашем пути к уподоблению нашему небесному Отцу.
Fulfilled physically and spiritually, the elders leave their humble apartment, ready to take on the world. They walk the streets of Odintsovo, just outside of Moscow, talking to anyone willing to listen.
Сегодня мы просто гуляем по улицам, говорим с людьми просто о Боге.
There are strange looks and frequent rejections, but the elders carry on.
He was saying that God is nature, and that he doesn't believe in someone who actually directs the universe.
Right.
Or like sits on a throne up in heaven.
It's so difficult for so many people here, but that's why missionaries are here. You're here to present a message that can give them hope for a better world.
Reeves is the new kid on the block, having arrived in Moscow from BYU in late August. He received his call not long after 2 Mormon missionaries were kidnapped in the Samara region of Russia back in March.
Mom was, she was pretty nervous, but she came around, so.
Callahan is the veteran elder from Alaska. He's been here more than a year now and has seen the devastating effects of Russia's economic depression.
This is our home right now, so of course it's kind of, it kind of hurts us to see what's going on. Basically, I guess you gain an empathy for where they're coming from, and then it's a lot easier to get them to see where you're coming from.
Which is a firm knowledge of the gospel and a willingness to share it with strangers in a strange land. They'll track thousands of families in dozens of high-rise apartment buildings, often going days without any positive feedback. But the one family that welcomes them in makes it all worthwhile.
You are the church to them. You embody what the church is. So they talk to you, and that's their very first impression of the church.
There's a lot of things a 19-year-old could be doing, but there's no other place that I'd rather be.
Now, the elders say the real joy for them comes from when a person or family takes the time to listen to them and be baptized into the LDS Church. And coming up in the next segment of Mission to Moscow, about 9:30, we'll introduce you to a Russian family who made that decision. We'll also show you the baptism of a recent Russian convert.
Now, those 2 elders, one was from Alaska, the other from California.
Southern California.
Do they have any native Russian missionaries?
Well, the vast majority of the elders and sisters that are serving there obviously are from the U.S., a lot of them from Utah, Arizona, and California. But there were several actually from Russia, a few that we met, and they're from several other countries like Sweden, England, even Tibet, we understand. So,
wonderful. We'll look forward to your next report in the next half hour. Thanks, Scott.
Fighting domestic abuse is enough
for treatment of what is being described as exhaustion. Welcome back to Fox 13 News at 9.
Earlier in this broadcast, we gave you a taste of what it's like to be an LDS missionary in Moscow. Missionaries pound a lot of pavement, climb a lot of stairs, and ring a lot of doorbells. There are numerous questions and frequent rejections. But the elders press on, seeking to share what they feel with others.
There's just something about knowing like the answers to the biggest of life's questions that gives you a peace that you just can't find anywhere else.
And missionaries are spreading that peace in Moscow. Fox 13's Scott McCain joins us again with more on his mission to Moscow.
Now, Scott, you got to follow the missionaries around in Moscow, and you even got to meet some of the Russians they're working with, didn't you?
That's right, Bob and Hope, and now you get to meet them. Despite the best efforts of LDS missionaries in Moscow, conversions don't happen every day. But when they do, Muscovites say it brings a whole new meaning to their lives. Meet Andrei Chenzov and his wife Galina. The couple, each with children from a previous marriage, met, fell in love, and decided to marry. Despite a warm home, healthy children, and food on the table, they say something was missing, a void which was only filled after meeting with 2 Mormon missionaries, one of whom was Elder Lawrence Callahan. It didn't take long before the couple and their children decided to be baptized.
What does it give me? It gives me a lot. It's real important. It's a real big support. I just can't imagine myself without the church and my brothers and sisters.
Galina says their newfound faith has been a source of strength, especially during the current economic crisis.
With everything going on around us, it touches us. But we live on an island. It's like an ocean around us, but we know for sure why we are living. We know we are not alone, and God protects our family, and everything's okay.
These are undeniably tough times for many Russians, with new social and economic challenges nearly every day. The LDS missionaries here are aware of this and try to offer the people they meet something money can't buy.
We don't give them material goods, but we give them something in the heart that's going to give them joy. It's a hope.
Some church leaders were worried that the crisis, as it's called in Moscow, would make it tougher to talk with Russians about religion. Instead, they're seeing just the opposite, and that the number of baptisms has actually increased lately.
That's something that I hear very frequently. I have found a sense of belonging. I feel that I have come home. I feel peace.
And there's much more from our mission to Moscow. Tomorrow, we'll introduce you to adults serving missions in Moscow and how folks back home here in Utah make those missions possible and successful.
Now, we saw that older woman about to get baptized. When did this couple go through the ceremony?
They had been in discussions with the elders for a little more than a month, and they were recently married and were in preparations for being baptized, and that happened about 2 weeks after we left, so about 2 weeks ago.
Does it take missionaries a long time to convince somebody to convert?
I think in general, yes, because people are a little bit guarded about who they talk to, especially foreigners and strangers. But in this case, the Chenzovs they said they were looking for something, and one day they hit upon a conversation with Elder Callahan, and it kind of started from there. And it took a couple of weeks, but yeah, they were baptized a couple weeks ago.
And I think those kids are amazing, learning Russian in, what, a couple months?
Yeah, pretty much. And then it's every day studying it and using it and working with it and talking to people and going through their lessons. It's pretty amazing.
And you came back with an amazing understanding. Just what, a week?
Spasibo. That's about it. Thank you. That was about it.
We're glad.
Halfway around the world for 3 years. They often leave behind businesses which have to be run by family members. The president of the Moscow South Mission says he couldn't imagine fulfilling his calling without the help of his brothers back here in Utah. G. Lowell Wright is president of the Moscow South Mission, which means he's the unofficial foster father to dozens of young men and women serving LDS church missions in Russia.
I mean, they're in God's hands, basically, but they're ultimately your responsibility. That's a pretty big responsibility.
Very big responsibility.
But it's a task he's taken on with pleasure, pride, and confidence, secure in the knowledge the family business is being looked after back in Utah. Lowell left behind a thriving plumbing company, which is now minus one Wright brother.
Actually, we're doing really well as a business in some ways. I would almost think that we ought to keep him over there.
All kidding aside, Lane and 2 other Wright brothers can't wait to get Lowell back home. But Lane also knows because they're all pitching in, Lowell is able to accomplish important work of another kind.
He lets us know what's going on over there. They're opening up new cities all the time, and the gospel's really spreading over there, and we're excited about it.
Lowell is nearly halfway through his 3-year mission to Moscow, and despite being half a world away from the business and his brothers, Wright says he actually feels closer to them.
And that's quite a blessing. And we feel a lot of, I think, the answers to a lot of people's prayers in our behalf. We didn't have any reservations whatsoever. We're just grateful for the opportunity to do it.
So while missionaries are tending to people's spiritual needs, who looks after the physical well-being of the elders? Well, coming up at 9:47, we'll show you the answer to that in the next segment of Mission to Moscow. Coming up in about a half an hour.
Now, Scott, we saw Lowell Wright was the president of the Moscow South Mission. There are other missions in Moscow?
Well, there's actually two now in Moscow. There's the Moscow South, which you saw the president tonight, and then the Moscow Mission. And they had to create the two because in the last couple of years, the growth has been so incredible. There's now about 200 missionaries, sisters and elders in Moscow. They had to create the break and make a differentiation between the two missions. So it's grown substantially.
Wow. All right. Well, we'll look forward to your next report. Thanks, Scott.
He's been giving away magic secrets, but his own identity has been a secret until now.
Tonight, he was unmasked himself. But what do other magicians think about what he has done?
And next, find out what the newest
Not adequate medical care, especially in a faraway place like Russia. It's a big concern for parents.
But Fox 13's Scott McCain is here to quiet any fears. Okay, Scott, who is looking after the health of the missionaries in Moscow?
Well, Hope and Bob, they are in the capable hands of Dr. Douglas Heiner. You know, the last thing most 19 and 20-year-olds worry about is their health until they get sick or hurt. And if that happens, thousands of miles away from home, they need someone they can trust. We caught up with a Utah doctor who's making house calls in Moscow.
Could you show us what's happened here?
This is what Dr. Douglas Heiner has been doing for nearly 50 years, mending bones, prescribing medicine, and making people feel better. It's just that this distinguished physician is used to more state-of-the-art surroundings, like UCLA Medical Center or the University of Utah, not a cramped apartment in Moscow, Russia. But this is where he and his wife wound up after Heiner retired and volunteered his services to the LDS Church.
But we didn't ever dream of coming to Moscow. We never thought of that. My wife said, the one thing I'd like not to do is to go where it's cold. I just don't like the cold weather. So when we got...
that didn't work out. But things are working out fine now, especially for the 200 Mormon missionaries in the Moscow area. Heiner sees an average of 3 to 4 elders a day, treating everything from broken bones and sprains to allergies, colds, and upset stomachs. Those who have medical needs beyond what Heiner can handle are sent to Russian hospitals, but not before Heiner meets and screens the local doctors.
There's a lot of people that are frightened about Russia and Russian medicine, and so we've been able to get the missionaries to relate to the better hospitals and better doctors, and I think that's helpful.
Sometimes I feel a little bit pressure.
This young missionary broke her leg during an accidental collision with an elder, a BYU football player no less, while playing soccer. Heiner set the brake and helps her deal with the pain. But perhaps the most important service he provides is calming kids who are hurt and far from home.
Either deal with them over the phone if it's a minor problem. If they need to come see them, they can do that, and then they can refer them to the best medical care available nearby. So I think it's a great service.
So parents at home, rest assured, they're in good hands.
I think that they don't need to worry as much as some of the stories that they hear would lead them to think they might need to.
Now, tomorrow we'll show you how Mormon church welfare efforts are helping kids in one Moscow school. And wrapping up our mission to Moscow, you'll meet some of the missionaries who are spreading the LDS gospel during a very dark time in Russia's history.
Scott, it sounds like Dr. Heiner could be enjoying life, sitting back instead.
And probably should be.
Right, but this is an awful lot of work in Russia, isn't it?
Now, this guy's tremendous. This is a man who started practicing medicine more than a decade before you or I were even born. He's got a list of accolades, degrees, and credentials a mile long, and very well could be enjoying a well-deserved retirement. But he told us that since life has been so good to he and his wife, they wanted to give something back, and this was the best way they figured out how they could do that.
And isn't that funny? Because good begets good begets good, so that's great.
Two remarkable men tonight.
Very much so.
Thanks
so
Scott.
much, Scott.
Well,
it's been a bit wet outside. Jody's going to have our 5-day forecast.
And next